I hurt some really, really good people, very close friends. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get better. I really am. And in this video, it might sound a bit defensive on some of the things I say. I'm really not trying to be, but I don't know any other way to phrase some of these things. I really, really hope that you'll gain some value from this video and understand my heart. Stick around to the very end so you fully get the whole picture. Thank you so much for being here, and again, I'm sorry. Hey everyone, Derek Lambert here. I want to have an honest conversation with you today, not about ancient texts as usual, but about something more personal. I need to address something head on. I've seen accusations online in different communities suggesting I'm sympathetic to MAGA, and in some cases, I've even been called a Nazi. I want to be crystal clear from the outset. That is not who I am. Not even close. I have never found anything about Trump's agenda or MAGA's policies remotely palatable. And Nazis? I'm not down with anything you could label like that. I'm solidly against racism, sexism, homophobia, or fascism in any form. What I will own is this. I'm often politically disconnected. I don't always have my finger on the pulse of what's happening in the news cycle. And that means I sometimes fail to read the room. I miss moments where I should speak up, or I say things without realizing how they land in the current climate. That's a genuine failing, and I take full responsibility for it. But there is a world of difference between being politically disengaged and being politically aligned with bigotry. So today, I want to lay out exactly where I stand. Not with defensiveness, not with vague references and reassurances. I want to be honest with specifics because I think you deserve that and because the times we're living in absolutely demand it. So let's talk about why MythVision exists. I, Derek Lambert, am an ex-Christian. I spent a significant part of my life inside Evangelical Christianity. I believed I was special, specifically chosen by God's election as his child before the foundation of the world. I wasn't casual about it either. I had a serious, consuming obsession with this religious ideology, debating all the time about it. But religion wasn't the only story shaping me. You see, I was born into a military household. My father was literally a Green Beret master sergeant in the Special Forces. He was an elite warrior, and the worldview that came with that upbringing was very powerful. We were the good guys. Everyone else was an enemy of the good. This was our country, and as white Americans with a traditional family, we saw things a very specific way. That internal narrative didn't start with me. It was indoctrinated into me, just as it had been indoctrinated into my mother and father and into their mothers and fathers before them. You can keep working backwards and find it running through generations. When I deconverted from Christianity, I had to question all of it. Not just the theology, but the entire worldview that came packaged with it. And the thing that cracked it open more than anything else was literally this channel. Through MythVision, I've been able to interview people from so many different areas and backgrounds of life, people with completely different experiences from my own. That has been the most enlightening experience of my life. I am not the center of the universe. It's obvious. That's what this has done. And I had to learn that twice, you see. First, I had to let go of the Christian supremacy that told me my religion was at the center of everything and that I was God's special child, while those outside my circle weren't. But then I had to confront something deeper, even harder. My outlook as a white American man living in a multicultural society reflected an internal narrative I had blindly believed without ever seeing it, that I was somehow better than or above others. Christianity gave me one version of that story. My upbringing gave me another. Both had to go. That doesn't mean I've made it, that I've arrived, but I'm damn sure on the journey to becoming better every single day. And I'm definitely not perfect. That journey led me here. MythVision exists because I believe understanding where our stories come from, really understanding them, can free us from dogma and manipulation. Some of these stories are visible. They're preached from pulpits, written into legislation, repeated in campaign rallies. You can point to them, you can argue with them, but others are invisible. They're the assumptions we absorb without even realizing it. The unspoken rules about who matters and who doesn't, and about what's natural and what's deviant, about who deserves power and who deserves obedience. Those invisible scripts are often the most dangerous because we follow them without ever knowing they're actually there. I want to expose both kinds so they lose their power over all of us. But let me be direct about what that means in practice. Mythology, as I've been studying it, isn't neutral. It never has been. Throughout human history, mythology has been the tool that allows people to do cruel, horrible things while still telling themselves they're the good guys. Myth empowers fascism. Myth empowers sexism. Myth empowers racism. Myth conceals malice and justifies oppression. So when I say I want to deconstruct mythology, I don't just mean let's understand each other better. I mean, I want to dismantle the specific stories that are used to control and harm people so those stories lose their power. I'm just really good at doing it from the religious avenue. The religious myths feed into the social political ones. That is the heart of this project. And right now, I think that work matters more than ever. What I see happening right now, we're living in frightening times. I mean, this is real, documented harm being done right now from the highest levels of government in America. I see religious narratives being weaponized to justify policies that hurt vulnerable people. This isn't abstract. Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation's 900-page blueprint for reshaping the federal government, calls for government imbued with biblical principles. It explicitly advocates for a biblically based definition of marriage and family. It argues that the religious convictions of employers and healthcare providers should allow them to discriminate based on sexual orientation and gender identity. This is ancient theocratic thinking dressed in modern policy language. I see ancient ideas about hierarchy and control being dressed in modern politics. In Oklahoma, for example, the state superintendent ordered every public school to incorporate the Bible into its curriculum and place a copy in every classroom, calling it a matter of American exceptionalism. He spent nearly $25,000 of state money on copies of Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA Bible. Louisiana passed a law requiring the 10 Commandments to be displayed in every public school classroom from kindergarten through college. Legislators in at least 15 other states have introduced similar bills. These aren't history lessons, ladies and gentlemen. This is the merging of religious authority with state power. And anyone who has studied how empires and theocracies operated in the ancient world recognizes the pattern immediately. I see hatred toward LGBTQ communities being justified through sacred texts. In 2025 alone, over 850 anti-LGBTQ bills were introduced across the country, the most in American history, with the vast majority targeting transgender people. These include bans of gender-affirming health care, bathroom restrictions, sports bans, forced outing of students to their parents, and bills that would classify supporting a trans child as child abuse, opening the door for the state to remove children from loving homes. In Texas, one bill even proposed charging transgender people with a felony for gender identity fraud, simply for telling their employer who they are. Some states have started forcibly reverting gender markers on identification documents that were changed years or even decades ago. This isn't protecting anyone. This is using the power of the state to erase people, and the religious justifications behind it are the same ones that have been used to persecute people for centuries. I see the merging of church and state threatening the secular foundations that protect all of us, religious and non-religious. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson has openly aligned himself with Christian nationalist principles. Project 2025's architects have declared that they are carrying out the Second American Revolution. Groups like the Convention of States Action, backed by prominent Republican lawmakers and conservative media figures, are working to trigger a constitutional convention that critics warn could be used to write Christian nationalism into the Constitution itself. The wall between church and state, the very thing that protects the freedom of every believer and every non-believer, is being dismantled brick by brick, ladies and gentlemen. And as someone who studies how myths have been used to consolidate power throughout history, I can tell you, this is not new. What's new is that it's happening here, and it's happening now. As someone who has spent years studying how myths function, how they shape identity, how they justify power, how they've been used for thousands of years to control populations, I cannot stay silent about this, and I won't. That's one of the reasons I made a recent episode called The Deadly Myth That Women Must Be Controlled. You really, really should take the time after this video, please. Go and watch it. It's one of my favorite shows to date. In the video, I traced an ancient and deeply harmful idea, the myth that women are dangerous, that women caused humanity's downfall. You find it in Gilgamesh, where this hero king rants against Ishtar, this destructive woman. You find it in Genesis, where Eve bears the blame for all evil and death, an impossibly heavy burden placed on women for thousands of years and still weaponized. I know this from the Christian churches by men today. You find it in Pandora, with her opening the jar, which brought all disease, death, and chaos into the world. You find it across religious traditions that treat women as lesser, such as Islam, where a woman is treated as half that of a man. Her testimony is half that of a man. My video doesn't even get into the burqa and the niqab, which covers these women as if they were magnets of lust from head to toe, often in black outfits. I made that video because these myths still shape how women are treated, how they're viewed, how they're valued today. This ancient patriarchal misogynistic myth is alive and strong right now in our modern world. Some people complained in the comments of that video that I should stay away from such topics and stick to the Bible. I want to be direct about what that complaint usually means. It often comes from people who don't want the sexism challenged. They're comfortable with mythology as long as it stays safely in the past and doesn't get applied to the present. Or they have fear of such ideas being dismantled by people who see the evil for what it is and hope to see a change in the real world. These commenters likely feel the threat of their own power being challenged, their indoctrination being exposed, and being forced to confront it right here, right now. But applying it to the present is exactly what I'm here to do. Now let me speak directly about MAGA. Since some people seem to think I'm aligned with MAGA, let me not be vague about this. I'm not going to give you some neutral Wikipedia-style definition that makes the movement sound reasonable. That itself would be participating in the myth. Yes, MAGA uses rhetoric like distrusting elites and sensible border policy and economic protectionism. Those are like the surface-level stories designed to make the movement sound appealing, because who doesn't distrust elites? Duh. Who doesn't want a functioning economy? No-brainer. But that's not what defines MAGA. What defines MAGA is what those stories are designed to conceal and justify. The documented reality includes an organized campaign of intimidation against people who aren't white, or who speak with an accent. The use of ICE not as border enforcement, but as a tool of racial terror against legal residents and even citizens. The systematic rollback of rights for LGBTQ people. The elevation of a single leader to near messianic, if not already messianic status, where his flaws must be reframed as strengths and his critics must be treated as enemies. The dismissal of any inconvenient fact as fake news. The open embrace of authoritarianism. I understand why some people are drawn to the appealing rhetoric, but I see the reality those myths are designed to hide. And that reality is repugnant to me. I literally want no part of it. Now here's something important. When people accuse me of being MAGA, they're not accusing me of being a secret Christian nationalist. Everyone in the world knows I'm not a Christian. That's not the worry. The worry, and I understand this, is whether I might be sympathetic to secular versions of MAGA ideology. A version that justifies racism and sexism not through Bible verses but through pseudoscience, through cultural arguments, through common sense claims, through just asking questions. That's the fox in the henhouse concern, and it's a legitimate one because there are people in the atheist and skeptic space who do exactly that, who use the guise of rationality to promote bigotry. So let me be unambiguous. I don't think there's a scientific justification for racism. There isn't. I don't think there's rational justification for sexism. There isn't. I don't think trans people are confused or deceived. They aren't. I don't think immigrants are invaders or criminals. They aren't. I don't think authoritarianism is acceptable when it's our guy doing it. It isn't. These aren't positions I hold abstractly. These are positions I came to by leaving the myth bubble I was raised in and actually listening to people whose experiences were different from mine. I plan to continue hearing more stories from those who left the high-control religious world to find freedom, and these stories will continue to shine. When you spend years inside evangelical Christianity, you absorb a lot of assumptions about gender, about sexuality, about who counts as one of us and who doesn't. And leaving that environment meant examining every one of those assumptions and rejecting the ones that were rooted in mythology rather than reality. That process didn't stop when I left Christianity, and it's ongoing even now. And it has led me to reject the secular mythologies that justify bigotry just as firmly as I reject the religious ones. I've literally watched myth-making happen in real time just recently. Let me give you a specific example of why I oppose this movement. Not ideologically, but as someone who studies how myth works. When the Epstein files came out and Trump's name appeared in them, I watched how quickly the narrative spun. Suddenly, apologists were rushing to claim that Trump was actually ratting out his buddy, that he was secretly working against Epstein all along, long before any of this became public. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not critical thinking. That's myth-making in real time. That's what happens when loyalty to a figure becomes more important than following the evidence. That's what happens when someone becomes so invested in a narrative that any information, no matter how damning, has to be reinterpreted to protect the story. I've seen this before. I saw it in religion, and I see it now in politics, and I want no part of it. Let me be as concrete as possible about what I oppose, not vague hand-waving, but specifics. I condemn what ICE is doing right now. Not border enforcement in the abstract, but the actual documented reality of raids on legal residents, the separation of families, the detention camps, the deportation of people to countries they've never lived in, the targeting of people for being brown or speaking Spanish. I condemn the rollback of rights for trans people, the bans on health care, the bathroom bills, the sports bans, the deliberate campaigns to make trans people's lives harder and more dangerous. I condemn the attacks on reproductive rights, the abortion bans, the criminalization of women and doctors, the elimination of exception even for rape and incest. I condemn the dismantling of environmental protections, the denial of climate science, the prioritization of corporate profits over human survival. I condemn the open corruption, the grift, the self-dealing, the pardons for cronies, the refusal to hold anyone accountable who serves the leader's interests. I condemn the embrace of political violence, the January 6th insurrection, the celebration of those who attacked the Capitol, the continued threats against election workers and journalists. I condemn it. These are specific policies and actions that I, Derek Lambert, oppose clearly and without reservation. Let me also make a note about my guest, because I think this is a very important aspect of what I'm trying to do. Over the years, I've interviewed a wide range of people: rabbis, pastors, atheists, historians, theologians, Christians, mythicists, scholars from many different backgrounds. I want to be clear. I do not endorse the politics or personal beliefs of every guest I've had on this show. When I interview someone, I'm engaging with their area of expertise, usually their scholarship on history, mythology, or religion. I can learn from someone's academic work without endorsing everything else about them. But I also want to acknowledge a legitimate concern. People worry that channels like mine could become a backdoor pipeline to harmful ideas. That a viewer might discover a guest through my show, go check out their other content, and end up exposed to ideology I'd never endorse. I'm really conscious of that concern. I'm not interested in platforming anyone's bigotry. When I have guests on, it's for their scholarly contributions, not to give them a megaphone for harmful beliefs. And I don't let guests use my show to promote those beliefs. I never have and never will. But I do understand why people are suspicious right now, and I want to validate that, not wave it away. We're living in a media environment that MAGA and the alt-right have deliberately poisoned with deception. There are creators who conceal their true beliefs to build audiences. There are literally people who use dog whistles and vague language to signal sympathy with bigotry while maintaining plausible deniability. There are people who platform extremists under the guise of hearing all sides, when their real goal is to funnel viewers toward radicalization. One person, for example, that comes to mind is Piers Morgan. If you just watch his show on YouTube, you'll know what I mean. This is real. It happens constantly, and it has created an environment where suspicion is reasonable, where you have to look for clues because open admissions are rare and liars are literally everywhere. This isn't what I'm trying to do. The clues people look for include vague language, avoiding clear positions, both sides framing, platforming problematic figures without pushback, and maybe I've been guilty of some of those things. Not because I harbor secret sympathies, but because I was politically disengaged and didn't realize how my silence or vagueness was being read. Some of my guests have some unbelievably great insights educating us, yet hold to other ideas that I will never broadcast on my channel, simply put. So starting with this video right now, I want to be very clear. Please hear me out. I'm not a secret Nazi. I'm not secretly sympathetic to MAGA. I'm not using my channel to pipeline anyone toward bigotry. I'm a guy who left a high-control religious environment, who has spent years learning to recognize mythology and manipulation, and who's trying to share what he's learned with anyone who will listen. That's literally it. I'd ask you to look at what I've actually produced. Really, just go to my channel, look at it, watch it, observe it, take notes. Look at the deadly myth that women must be controlled that was just recent, where I systematically dismantle the mythological roots of patriarchy and misogyny. Look at the years I've spent critiquing authoritarianism in religious context, the same patterns I now recognize in political movements. Just look at how I've consistently challenged mythic structures that oppress people. Whether those structures are religious or political, ancient or even modern, that's who I am. That's what MythVision is. I'm not here to fight with anyone. I'm here because I believe that understanding our myths, where they come from, how they shape us, how they've been used to justify cruelty is one of the most important things we can do right now. Not just ancient myths, which I do all the time, the myths being created around us every single day, including the myths that make fascism seem reasonable, that make bigotry seem like common sense, that make cruelty seem like strength. I'm against those myths. I'm against what they justify, and I'm going to keep saying so more clearly, more often, and more directly than I have before. That's a commitment I'm making to you today. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. Thank you for watching, for questioning, for thinking. I'm Derek Lambert, and this is MythVision. Let's keep learning together, keep growing together, keep trying to better ourselves together. And never forget, we are MythVision.